Thanks again to our thrivers for their perspectives. As we think about hope and what it means to all of us, we want to look into the future. What does hope look like for net research, treatment, and thrivership? Hear what our speakers say about that, and then join us for our live question and answer segment. You can submit your questions at slido.com. What gives me hope is seeing the growth of the net research community around the world and knowing that these scientists are working every day to discover the mysteries behind neuroendocrine cancer and to develop new treatments. So I think the future is bright and there will be many more options for neuroendocrine cancer patients.
I'm extremely hopeful and optimistic. For NETs, we've already seen significant strides in drug development. In front of my eyes, several pivotal randomized phase 3 studies have read out and has really transformed how we manage neuroendocrine tumor patients. And several more are in the pipeline, which will take our field to the next level. For example, PRRT, the novel forms of PRRT, the alpha PRRT are very exciting. Combination PRRT with radiation sensitizers are extremely promising. So for NET space, very, very excited how things have really evolved with everybody's support, especially the patient advocacy groups, the government, the policymakers, and industry. I do feel that we do need to catch up when it comes to NECs. Very tough disease, the outcomes are very dismal. However, I do feel optimistic about the field. The recent approval of DLL3 BiTE antibody was fantastic. I personally treated some of the early first-in-human patients on that. I've seen firsthand, and patients who benefit from that drug do experience long, durable responses. And that's the direction we need to head in, find novel, promising targets and drugs which don't only improve median PFS by a month or two, but significantly improves the outcomes. Similarly, radiopharmaceuticals or application of radiopharmaceuticals in NECs are very exciting, and other target therapies like PARP inhibitor IO combination. So again, a lot of potential opportunities for drug development in NEC space.
What really gives me hope is the community for neuroendocrine tumors. So the patient community, the support organization like NETRF, it's a really close-knit group, and there's a lot of great things that these communities can help us, through advocacy, through outreach, through education, to spread the word about neuroendocrine tumors, to garner funding for research, to help us in our research to accomplish what we need to do. And in our research, we're very excited to, continue to develop better treatments for these neuroendocrine tumors, and no doubt is thanks to all the advocacy and support from our foundations.
What gives me hope for research at NETRF is our collaborative group of researchers who are in the lab every day working to learn more about this disease. We're very hopeful for different areas of research, such as early detection, improved radioligand therapy, as well as immunotherapies.
Probably the most reassuring thing about this field is the incredible community that we enjoy between the researchers, the clinicians, the patients. I think the genuine collaborative spirit that everyone has really gives me tremendous hope that we're just going to continue to keep pushing forward, even when things are difficult or vexing or confusing, and we're going to continue to invest our time and energy and make progress together.
The increasing number of researchers and clinicians who are focused on NETs is giving me a lot of hope that we're going to make progress much more quickly and with more informed movement in what we study.
My hope is that there is much more awareness. There are much more providers that are becoming interested in this disease or see more of this disease. So that gives me comfort that patients will have providers with more knowledge. I was just discussing with oncologist recently that she was like, gosh, I'm seeing so many NET patients. I was like, you know what, why don't you come to the NETs meeting in October? And she's like, I might do it. So I'm happy that there's more healthcare providers that are getting involved. And then on the scientific front, there are so many new strategies and trials, and the community is really focusing on develop more treatments. I think theranostics and PRT, and either with retreatment or with combinations, is really going to make our patients live longer and with quality of life. And hopefully, we will continue to develop strategies for patients that do not qualify for whatever reason for PRT, and we need other drugs to help the patients. The future is bright for neuroendocrine cancer care.
What really gives me hope is that there is a lot of drug development at the moment. There are a lot of companies developing new kinds of drugs, and I think we need to try to see if these are effective in our patient population. And for that, we need a lot of new knowledge, and this knowledge is being generated. There are big studies coming. There are big studies being published at the moment that show how the molecular landscape of these tumors is separated. And I think this knowledge, compared to all the new drugs that are coming, might enable a more effective treatment in the future.
I think what gives me hope is the fact that it seems to me that there are tremendous advancements in all avenues of therapy for cancer care, and specifically for neuroendocrine cancer. I think, at least speaking for myself, I think we've talked about histotripsy, but there's a lot of other innovative therapies that are coming out, including robotics, direct tumor injections, a lot of other things that are on the horizon. And it just seems like each year there's more and more opportunities and options for our patients.
What gives me hope, first of all, is our patients. I think patients are really the backbone of all we do, especially when it comes to clinical care and research care. Seeing patients doing better and better over the years, living longer and longer, having a better quality of life than they even had 10 years ago, I think that really gives me hope that we will be able to cure this disease. The other thing that gives me hope is to see that patients and their families and their friends seek out neuroendocrine tumor specialists, are part of support groups, are part of online groups, and really support each other. I think that being diagnosed with neuroendocrine tumor is a journey, and you can have the best clinicians and the best therapies, but ultimately patients have to go through this journey with their friends and their family, and also with people that perhaps through these support groups, through these online groups, don't know them, but still share their experience and their recommendations. And I think that that's getting better and better. And I think that it really helps patients. And therefore, I would assume that this will continue to develop further in the future and help our patients even more.
I've been doing this now for 20 years, and the expansion of genetics and the role of treatment options for patients has exploded exponentially. And that part makes me the most excited, because we can offer patients now treatment options that extend their life by 10 years. So you're no longer dying of your cancer, you're living with your cancer, and that's okay. Similar to any other disease type like diabetes.
One of the things that gives me hope as someone who works with people living with NETs is seeing the amount of love and care and dedication that the professional NET specialist community has. You have a lot of people working very hard for you.
From my personal experience, what I will say has given me hope is just seeing the advancements. When I first started working with patients with a specific diagnosis, I'll be very honest, I didn't really know much, and I don't think we even had a surgeon on staff yet. So just seeing the fact that our program has grown to the point where we now have, oncologists that specialize in this, medical oncologists and our surgical oncologist, and the fact that I'm seeing all of these additional resources and webinars really does give me hope, because I'm seeing this information being more readily available for our patients who I can think back about 7 years ago when I started working with this patient population. I mean, there was really nothing available. And if it was very vague. Whereas now, when I, was preparing for this and I was looking online, I see so much more information that, patients can refer to, which is hopeful.
I think there's a lot of things that give me hope. One is we're finally starting to recognize this disease. Before, when we started our clinic here, for example, many of my colleagues would say, "What is that again? How many patients have that? Do you even have enough people for a clinic?" And certainly now there's recognition that this is a common disease and people are living with it day in and day out. I think the emphasis on quality of life and patient well-being as part of the treatment journey is something that is a very positive step forward. Like I said, we're understanding not only about helping patients live longer, but help them live better. And we're including that in the research and the work we do. We're developing steps towards personalizing treatment. So understanding that not all neuroendocrine patients are the same and they may have personal preferences, but also their diseases are different and their treatments may need to be tailored to that person. And we're making big steps in getting towards that area of personalized medicine. And then, of course, the research of the new treatments that are coming aboard. We're having more and more new treatments. We're understanding sequencing. We're understanding how to combine the treatments to not only improve outcomes, but to make people's life better.
What gives me hope about NETs is you can actually see quite tangibly progress. One of the most amazing slides I see at some of these conferences is looking at the new treatments that have been approved over time. So typically the x-axis, if you will, is years. And then you can see that it's accelerating. So there was probably a good decade or two there where very little happened in the net world. And then there's been an explosion of advances. And sometimes I sort of talk about 2009 as the year from which henceforth everything has changed. So in 2009, we really sort of embraced long-acting octreotide or sandostatin LAR. 2014, we embraced lanreotide or somatulin. 2017, 2018, we started getting into drugs like Zermello that help with carcinoid syndrome. And then the FDA approval of Lutathera was a complete game changer. So my point is, after a very fallow period where NETs were viewed as, quote, too rare to study, we now understand that they are hugely prevalent. And most importantly, there's things that we can do, things that matter, things that extend lives and improve quality of life. And I think seeing that real progress, and you do have to zoom out a little bit sometimes to see it, that gives me hope.
I think in 20 years we have many more treatments, but it's not enough. And I think that's the promise of the future, to see the growth of the NET research community and know that they are working so hard every day to develop even more treatments and more options for patients.
Seismic changes in how we manage neuroendocrine tumors over the last 20 years. From no treatment to maybe one treatment called somatostatin analog to now multitude of treatments with PRRT, targeted therapies with TKIs, mTOR inhibitors, and several in the pipeline now with newer forms of immunotherapies, cellular therapies. It is just a roller coaster ride, and just super happy for the field, for the patients, for the caregivers, and my colleagues in the community. It's just fantastic, fantastic growth. This really materialized because of our better understanding of neuroendocrine cancers. I think a big role in the drug development space happened from understanding the burden of disease, diagnosing neuroendocrine tumor appropriately, pathological classification, so we understood what we are dealing. It's not all lumped into carcinoid disease, which are considered benign. So we've moved away largely from a lot of those myths. We now have a much better understanding about neuroendocrine tumors, which are the aggressive varieties, which are not so aggressive varieties, and how different grades plays into the prognosis. So we can tailor treatments accordingly. So that by far has been the biggest thing, in my opinion, over 20 years, better understanding of the disease period that has led to better treatment options for our patients.
We've seen a lot of changes in that treatments. I think 20 years ago, the only treatment available was surgical debulking for symptomatic patients, and then came the somatostatin analogs, then came PRT and all these targeted therapies. So the treatment landscape has gotten a lot busier and for the better for neuroendocrine tumors. And we have more exciting things on the horizon, next generation PRT, next generation immunotherapy approaches, including CAR T or cellular therapy. So lots to look forward to.
The changes I've seen in treatment over the last 20 years is that we went from having no approved therapies to having multiple approved therapies here in the US for neuroendocrine tumors.
I think there's been tremendous progress in the last 20 years. The fundamental difference from 20 years ago is really the introduction of randomized data and I think evidence-based medicine, which has, I think, totally transformed the landscape of what we do. I mean, almost everything we use today, we didn't have 20 years ago. Certainly not in the States, whether that's radioligands or the targeted therapies. It's really been quite amazing to sort of look back and think about just how much was different 20 years ago.
We have more targeted therapies that are beneficial to these patients. So we've seen improvements in peptide receptor radiotherapy or PRT, and we have had targeted treatments, whether it's against activated pathways that are specific in certain tumor types, like everolimus targeting the mTOR pathway, or sunitinib that prevents the tumors from becoming more vascularized. And so I think we've been able to better tailor the right drugs to these patients based on what we've learned about their biology. And that's improved dramatically over the last 20 years.
When I sit with my patients, especially when they were early diagnosed but they unfortunately already are diagnosed with metastatic disease, I said, this is the roadmap of the treatments that we have for you. And I count like 5 treatments or more. And when, 20 years ago, we didn't have all this. We have somatostatin analogs pretty much, right? So as the drug development for this disease has grown so much, and it's fun to go over with patients and draw in the whiteboard for them. These are all the treatments. This is the benefits in the literature has shown. Obviously, everyone is different. And then, guess what? By the time that we exhausted all these options, I am sure there's going to be more options. So let's just keep you healthy and around and until the next best thing comes.
I have some experience over the past few years in the treatment of these patients. And of course, I am into the literature of these cancers. The biggest changes, I think, which are coming now is the knowledge that we are getting from the molecular subtyping of these tumors. So it's not only typical and atypical, there's a whole spectrum behind these separations. And I think these insights will really give the field in the next few years a new edge, a new incentive to do more research.
We have seen vast changes in interventional radiology. It's a very young specialty. It's essentially was founded in the late 60s. 20 years ago, we didn't even have catheters that we could put into the arteries of the liver. And now we have sub-millimeter catheters that we can get out into 1 or 2 millimeter vessels that feed tumors. So we have seen exponential changes in our field, and that's really translated to super targeted therapies that we have for our patients. And then there's always new technologies that are coming out that are less invasive, and as we've seen with histotripsy, that are actually non-invasive as well.
So over the past 20 years, we've made huge progress in terms of systemic therapies, particularly the development of theragnostics, so both for diagnoses as well as for therapy of metastatic neuroendocrine tumors. Things have pretty dramatically changed. I would say that the theragnostics part has been, in my opinion, the most exciting part, with also the most potential for the future. But there have been other things like targeted therapy, everolimus, sunitinib, now recently cabozantinib. So as we understand the molecular composition of these neuroendocrine tumors, as we understand what drives them, we are able to design new therapies. And that's what's been done over the last 20 years, and I think will continue to happen in the future.
When I first started, most of the talk when it came to hereditary forms of cancer were primarily around breast and ovarian cancer. And so it's only within the last 10 years that people are like, well, wait a minute, take a look at these other syndromes that have always existed, but haven't been on other people's radar. So that's the part that makes me excited about that field, is that we are now seeing neuroendocrine tumors, more people be aware that they even exist. And I think a lot of that is around these hereditary forms that are putting it on everybody's radar.
I've been working with the NET community for 2 years, but I know that there has been a whole lot of changes in the last 20 years. And this gives me great hope because I know that once there is momentum with treatments and research, that things continue to progress, and then there becomes more treatments and continues to have more research. So there's a lot of great things happening, and the past 20 years are a big part of the story.
The biggest change that I've noticed would honestly be the treatments and the multidisciplinary care approach that has started to develop over the last several years, at least at U Chicago Medicine. I've seen the biggest change because we've gone from not having this specialty to now having an entire group kind of dedicated to, this patient population, which as a result has included various different kinds of treatments by different kinds of providers, and it's overall helped improve the outcomes from what I've seen early in my career versus now.
What has really been exciting has been the number of new treatments that we've had developed. At 20 years ago, we really had one treatment and, somatostatin analogs. And now we have a range of different treatments that have been developed and understanding. So the research of development of new treatments. And then we add on to that now radioligand therapy, a whole different way of treating cancer, which is going to be a big part of treating all types of cancer in the future. And for us to be able to start this journey in neuroendocrine cancers is very exciting. So I think the number of new treatments and the number of new ways we have of treating neuroendocrine cancer has really been exploded in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. So, my dad died in 1994, and I sometimes wish I could get in a time machine and go back and show him modern medicine that he might benefit from it. So the two things that are closely linked that have gotten better are diagnostics and treatments. Even when I was first diagnosed in 2009, some of the scans that we had then, and I'm thinking specifically of the Octrio scan, if anyone listening has ever had that, the Actria scan, which more technically was called a 111 indium somatostatin receptor scintigraphy, again, that's why we call it the Actria scan, it gave us a map of the body that frankly looked kind of like a snowstorm. It was this really blurry, high-level map, and it didn't give you a whole lot of anatomic detail. And now we have things like dotatate PET scans, whether performed with gallium-68 or copper-64. It's basically the difference between going from old TV, sort of the massive box with sort of a grainy picture, to modern flat screen that can do high def. And the reason that matters is the more that you can see, usually the more you can treat. So if something lights up on one of these modern PET scans, it means that we can target it either with somatostatin analogs and or with PRRT. So I think this whole field of theranostics, the notion of being able to see more and then treat what you can see, I think that's what's changed the most.
My hope is that in 5 years, first of all, we are diagnosing and detecting the disease much earlier. So we have more options for patients, and that we have many new treatments that today really are just someone's innovative idea, and that we're able to pursue those ideas into the clinic.
Clinical oncology and research is probably the most dynamic field in all of the medicine. The most number of trials, most number of research, most number of research dollars being spent. It will be difficult to predict how next 5 years will pan out. Things that I'm personally very excited about is the role of theranostics and growing role of theranostics in management of neuroendocrine tumors. So in about 5 years, I foresee not one, but several of theranostics drugs will enter the field, which will make it a little bit challenging for us as providers, but it'll be better for overall field because we have more tools in our toolkit to manage this cancer. So we will see alpha PRT, we will see novel types of beta PRTs, combination of PRT with other agents. So I think that's where in the next 5 years I see the most promise, the advent and the growing role of theranostics in management of NETs.
Several of the ongoing trials will help us answer how we best kind of sequence or combine the available treatments. We'll probably find out about what are better predicted biomarkers in terms of looking at tumor genomic data and then predicting which particular treatment is a better fit for the patient. And of course, we'll probably have newer versions of the existing therapies, such as PRT or immunotherapy, and etc.
I hope that in 5 years, neuroendocrine cancer treatments will have improved to the point where we can individualize treatments for patients, that we're able to incorporate molecular and genetic data about a patient and their tumor into their treatment plans, and that we have a better understanding of how to sequence treatments so that every patient gets the most optimal treatment plan for them.
Yeah, I think in 5 years, I think we'll largely be seeing the impacts of studies that are ongoing today. I think there's a lot of novel radioligands at the moment, and I suspect that as those sort of complete their development cycles, we're going to see dramatic changes in the arsenal of radioligands and standard therapy.
Over the next 5 years, I really hope that we are going to give the patients some new options that will in some way improve anti-tumor immunity. What we hope to do is leverage that immune system to help fight off the cancer. And I think not only the research that my group is doing, but many other groups, we're trying to figure out how to harness that immune system and use it to better kill off the tumor cells. That is one of the best things that we can do because it would provide a sustained anti-tumor response or durable response that we hope could last a lifetime and really just change the outcomes for these patients to something wonderful.
So I think for the starters, I'm really hopeful that we're going to be seeing much more of retreatment with PRT and PRT with combinations. And I think that hopefully we'll start having a hint if CAR T cell or cell therapy strategies work for neuroendocrine cancers. I know that there are some trials that are just started or about to get activated. And gosh, if that works, it will be amazing. So there is a lot of hope in the emerging treatments. It's becoming a very complex disease to treat because all our options are amazing. And, I already try to do and understand as much of theranostics as I can. And if the cell therapy pick up speed for neuroendocrine cancers, then I'll have to go back and learn more about cell therapies. That's something that I don't use very often for my other cancers that I treat even. So yeah, it's fun with the new treatments that we develop. We as scientists and physicians, we also have to go back to school and learn more about this. So it's a fun time to be a neuroendocrine cancer doc.
What I envision, what we're currently trying to set up is that we have a multi-platform study where we can evaluate all these different tumors based on the molecular subtypes. And for each molecular subtype, we try to prescribe a different treatment. This will be very difficult to do because of the low incidence of this disease and because these type of studies are very expensive to do. But if we are able to provide a molecular subtype treatment, then I really think we can improve the efficacy of our drugs, decrease the toxicity, maybe even for some patients where you know that it doesn't work. So that is my vision for the future, and I hope we see that happening in the next 5 years, which is a personalized treatment.
I'm really excited to see what the next 5 years brings us. I believe that we will continue to develop new therapies for our patients that will continue, at least on the interventional radiology side, be less invasive, allow patients to sort of return back to living their lives with less downtime. And I think, again, a big focus, at least in our specialty, but also in cancer care in general, is quality of life. And so just maintaining a high quality of life.
I think in 5 years from now, you will see a whole new set of radiotheragnostics. So what's very exciting for radionuclide therapy is that we've been using beta-emitting particles in Lutathera, but there are now new particles that we're studying, like alpha particle. They travel less, but they have higher energy, so the potential to destroy more. So I think that alpha therapy is an exciting new concept. But on the other hand, I also think that PRT as it is right now is far from having achieved its maximum potential. I think it is important that we continue to focus on understanding why these therapies work, understanding why certain patients respond better than others, understand whether we can combine radioligand therapies with additional drugs to improve their efficacy. I think this is what you're going to see over the next 5 years. In addition to, and this comes back to my talk a little bit, understanding treatment sequencing. I think that really understanding what treatment is best at a certain time in a patient's journey is something that more and more groups are looking into. And I think that as we collect more data and collect more information on how our patients respond to certain therapies, we will be able to tell you in 5 years, what the next best treatment option is, rather than just kind of shoot in the dark and be like, well, we'll try this therapy, and then if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. So I think that those two things, theragnostics and specifically radioligand therapy, as well as treatment sequencing, are the two things that you will see that will drastically improve over the next 5 years.
We're going to find out more and more about other disease types associated with neuroendocrine tumors. SDHA and SDHB, C, D, all of those are all relatively new genes that we've just recently discovered. And I think that now that we're doing more panel testing, we're going to be able to find reduced penetrance with some of these conditions. So take, for example, VHL. They used to think that there was 100% penetrance, meaning 100% chance you were going to get some form of cancer associated with VHL. And now that we're doing panel testing, we're finding more and more unaffected people that perhaps maybe this penetrance is not as high as we originally thought.
Neuroendocrine treatments have been changing rapidly fast. There's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of attention around radiopharmaceuticals and PRRT. There's a lot of things going on in the space. And I think it's an exciting time. And I actually believe that in 5 years, we're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of good things happening and a lot of choices for people.
I think in the next 5 years and beyond, what we're going to see is more personalized treatment. We are going to be able to tailor the treatment with the different treatment options we have now, both in terms of what's the right treatment for the patient and for the disease they have, and also what's the right sequencing and what's the right timing. And I think being able to offer individualized treatment plans is going to be a very exciting part of the future of neuroendocrine cancer.
I think they're going to get more targeted. What I mean by that is, chemo gets a pretty bad rap, and deservedly so. It tends to cause a lot of indiscriminate toxicity, meaning that most chemo kills whatever is growing in the body, good or bad. So patients tend to lose their hair, they can get mouth sores, they can get horrible diarrhea if they slough their gut. But what we're really after, of course, is direct impact on the tumors. So I think the way I see the arc of history bending in oncology and in NETs as well is to make it more specific so that a given treatment is affecting the tumor and hopefully leaving the patient alone. And PRT is pretty good at doing that. Remember that, this whole notion of targeted therapy means that when you give someone PRT, the radiation dose is largely, not quite exclusively, but largely being delivered like a smart missile to the tumors, and ideally the tumors alone. And we're getting better and better at that. You have to delve into nuclear physics a bit, but as we get into the alpha emitters, isotopes like actinium, for instance, they emit such a tiny amount of radiation, or at least over a tiny distance, that you should really be dropping that payload on the tumor and leaving the person alone. The reason that matters is less side effects for the person and less long-term risks, like less risk of, for instance, bone marrow damage, more protection of the kidneys. So I think that's where we're heading, is getting more precise, making ourselves, the oncologists, less of a blunt instrument.